Welcome everybody to the DC New 52 review. I want to thank you for tuning into another episode. I am your host as always, Pauly DC, and let's get into another one of these things. Today I will review Blue Beetle Vol.1. It was titled Metamorphosis, and it was written by Tony Bedard with art by Guara, J.P. Mayer, and Rui Jose, with the first 6 issues being released between November 2011 to April of 2012. Getting into a bit of Blue Beetle background first, our main character here, Jamie Reyes, or Jaime to his friends and family, is the third person to hold the mantle. He made his debut in Infinite Crisis number 3, February 2006, by Keith Giffen, John Rogers, and Cully Hamner. A guy named Dan Garrett was the original, going way back to 1939, and he later got origins, gaining certain powers by a magical object called the Scarab. Ted Kord, the most well-known character to be Blue Beetle, hit the scene in the, at the time, Charlton Comics' Captain Atom number 83, November 1966, by Steve Ditko. He became most popular as a Justice League International member, partnering up with Booster Gold, getting into all sorts of antics, and he is one of the smartest people in the DC universe, making up for him not having any powers. If you know a thing or two about Watchmen, you'll know that Night Owl Dan Dreiberg was based on him, equipped with his own Archie Owl ship that in his case obviously looked like a beetle, and he called it the Bug. Back to Jaime, his Blue Beetle version got a way different setup, having the scarab he possessed be alien technology, which granted him an armored suit with a slew of abilities, and for the New 52, that is how it stayed. Issue number 1 starts hundreds of years ago in Space Sector 2 with a planet of aliens being attacked by an evil blue beetle called Kaji Ka or Kaji Kai, not really sure, and he goes on to destroy the world and all its inhabitants easily, but then we find out he was once one of them. And that is how the New 52 Scarabs work when explained to him by Lucreza, a member of the alien creators of the technology, the Reach. The Scarabs get deployed into space to find hosts, which they then attach to parasitically, thus creating the Warriors. And at the moment, one is heading to Earth, only to be stopped by a tough-looking Green Lantern, who mentions the Green Lantern Corps know exactly what the Reach is, as the partly busted Scarab plummets to Earth, arriving near a Mayan temple. Things then cut to modern-day El Paso, Texas, where Jaime is first seen not looking to be the best soccer prospect, and then, yikes. We're less than 10 speech bubbles in with the humans, and already we got shit like this being said. Paco, a gangbanger buddy of Jaime, is introduced next, calling out Joey Gonzalez, the guy making the rude comments, who is also said to be a blonde Puerto Rican, which I don't even want to get into. We then meet Brenda, a friend and possible love interest to Jaime, handing out party invitations she's having and being hosted by her Tia Amparo, which is Spanish for Aunt Protection. However, Jaime is barred from going since his parents seem to have issues with this aunt, last name Cardenas. It appears she's quite a bad gal indeed, having hired a trio, well, 2 assassins called Brutal or Brutal, I'm not really sure, and Rompehuesos, plus a were-coyote to obtain the recently discovered scarab now in Texas. And they call her La Dama, or the Lady in Spanish. The desired item is already in the hands of 3 known DC villains, Phobia Warp and Pelasmus, having been tasked to get it by 2 other longtime DC villains, The Brain and Monsieur Mala. So a 3-on-3 fight goes down, with Jaime showing up due to sneaking out with Paco, and for some reason ending up conveniently right on the same street as this is going down. Had to get him here somehow, I guess. And he ends up possessing the Scarab during the fighting, which is ready for its new host, taking him over as he yells, Kaji Da, a little nod to Dan Garrett since that's what he would yell to activate his Blue Beetle powers. Issue number 2 begins with a lot of confusion as Jaime freaks out with his Blue Beetle transformation and all the villains present being unaware that the Scarab is no longer up for grabs, which can't take full control of Jaime like usual because it's been damaged over time, but it can still communicate with him and he can't stop himself from nearly killing Brutal and Rompehuesos, who had a pretty apt suit since that name means break bones in Spanish. Well, mission accomplished it looks like, buddy. Oh, and Plasmus also cooks the coyote thing medium well. Blue Beetle then saves the recently knocked out Paco, flying them away and heading to Casa Cardenas, where Brenda is waiting for them with Tia Amparo. But of course, when the two boys arrive looking like they do, security personnel start shooting up the place, and when Jaime tries to reveal his ID, the Scarab gets him to puke all over Tia Amparo's shoes instead. Nice. He then subdues the guards and takes off just in time for us to jump to Space Sector 2809, where Kaji Ka and Lucreza are conquering and then cocooning another world for the Reach's Hive Masters when a signal from Kaji Da is received. Issue number 3 opens on Jaime's parents calling Paco to ask him about their son's whereabouts, but he doesn't exactly have the best answers. Then we see Tia Amparo assuring Brenda everything will be okay, but she's still really up to no good, later checking in on her 3 half-dead villain goons to get info from them, and then she receives a call from Mother Reyes, which doesn't do her or Jaime any favors. Miss Cardenas is now very pissed, going on to kill the were-coyote, and then she does some kind of witch-looking ritual on him so she can get a glimpse of Blue Beetle. Okay, Blue Beetle is out on a joy flight on the town as he chats with his new Scarab pal, finding out that it's alien tech that Kaji Ka and Lucreza have tracked to Earth, where direct contact is required despite the large amount of metahumans on Earth. Kaji Ka is especially interested since Jaime shows he can override the Scarab if he focuses enough, as seen when he visits his parents and little sister after causing an error in the Scarab, thus shutting down the armor. Lastly, Plasmus Warp and Phobia are seen in Paris, explaining why they failed to another higher-up member of their villainous group, Silverback, a mechanical gorilla who totally reminded me of Cygor from the Spawn comics. Issue number 4 has Paco returning to his gang, the Chuco 13s, trying to explain what happened to him, and that he's most pissed about losing his car. However, he does get to see it again one last time since it's the only lead Silverback and the 3 other villains have on Blue Beetle, so the Chuco 13s actually think it's a good idea to try and fight these guys, but the gang is sprayed down Jesse Ventura Old Painless style by Silverback, and then the boss is questioned. Over at the Reyes residence, Jaime's parents both get their first look at the Scarab on his back, which he lies about, and then things sort of just cut to him at school the next day, which, come on, how could you possibly think this was a good idea? I don't know and I don't care. Jaime has a run-in with Joey the Dickhead, resulting in Blue Beetle almost coming out, but Brenda steps up to help, and her thanks from Jaime is him running, then flying off due to Paco being in danger after what she told him. He arrives at a dingy motel after Scarab tracked Paco's phone, but the 4 villains are already there beginning a fight with Silverback, who is quite beastly but no match for Blue Beetle, being defeated by a neural energy attack which forces Warp, Phobia, and Plasmus to haul ass. Unfortunately, Paco then comes out saying Jaime's name and sees his face, which Scarab takes as an identity exposure threat, reacting to him with violence. Yeesh. Issue number 5 continues right from the previous one as Jaime looks eye to eye with Paco extremely uncomfortably since he's just stabbed him in the heart. This leads into him overriding Scarab again, forcing it to give Paco something called a transbiotic anti-trauma unit from his suit, which keeps him alive. And while EMS shows up, Blue Beetle flies off to a junkyard with Silverback to question him, and basically finds out there's a person's mind in there that has to get out, but Blue Beetle doesn't care, leaving that Robo-Gorilla behind. Ho ho, a little bit of a savage in young Jaime here. In normal form, he goes back to the hospital, checking on the barely alive Paco and distraught Brenda, believing things are her fault. No, it's actually your crazy aunt's fault, who is then seen inviting Jaime to her house for a rather vague reason, which he accepts, even against Scarab saying no. What are you thinking? This chick has bad news written all over her. See what I mean? I told you, man, I told you. Now she's got you in some sort of spellbinding circle after you try to compliment her art. Blue Beetle has to come out trying to defend, but it's no good. Magic beats highly advanced alien tech, I guess? Blue Beetle does get a break though, in a bumbling security guard entering the room, who Scarab sees as a weapon, launching him at Miss Cardenas, which breaks the spell and blows Blue Beetle outside before the house goes full poltergeist, evaporating into nothingness. Well then. In the last scene, Paco winds up recovering real quick because the Blue Beetle tech that was put inside him takes over his body, turning him into, Black Beetle? Ah, can't forget, there was one last time we'd see the Lucreza and Kajika team, here targeting Blue Lantern Homeworld Odin, which was a small crossover with the Green Lantern New Guardians later on. Issue number 6 is the last one in this volume. Jaime is first seen to be just another horny teenager in Brenda's presence, and while he keeps the whole "her aunt tried to murder me" thing to himself, she gets annoyed that he's not listening to her, being worried that Paco is missing. Not for long though, since he shows up at Jaime's place to give us a big climax fight. Blue Beetle realizes that this foe, now calling himself Thorax, is gonna be a big challenge, and he argues with Scarab on what to do while his house is decimated. Mrs. Reyes and Jaime's sister then arrive at the worst possible time because the fighting intensifies, only to then abruptly stop when Blue Beetle hits Brenda as she's trying to help the Reyes family, and then it's said Jaime ain't in charge no more, which then gets Thorax to surrender and powered down back into Paco, so no more harm will come to Brenda since he likes her too. Yeah, I'm not so sure about that one. It's then revealed that this was all a ruse by Jaime, and as Blue Beetle, he flies off to look for new help. Not really ending on the best note here. Alright. The plot is pretty basic, just your usual teenage problem story with the main character then getting powers, so he then has to balance some new ones. There wasn't many Latin American heroes in the New 52, so that was a plus, but there was also nothing interesting about Jaime to add to his roots or personality. He wasn't comedic, extra clever, charismatic. He's just a good friend for Paco, sort of. Also, there's no way that Brenda couldn't discern that he was Blue Beetle in issue number 6. There's no way. The guy just vanishes as this thing shows up to fight Thorax. Yeah, there's no way. Also, an attempt was made to give Blue Beetle a rogues gallery with minus the reach 9 villains being presented, but none had a long-lasting effect. Obviously, with the dialogue, I gotta mention the amount of Spanish being spoken, which could get a bit inconvenient at times if you can't understand the language, but hey, Google's free. Jaime and the Scarab's bickering became a mainstay of the short-lived series, while the villains ended up getting the more memorable speech over the regular humans here in this first volume. However, Tia Amparo and Mrs. Reyes had the most standout dialogue, and I really wish that they got more attention early on here. Let's talk a little bit about the art now. The best word that I first thought of was stationary. It didn't really jump into anything that could be dubbed exceptional, and it never dipped in quality during any sequences. All the character designs are solid, everything flows together nice. The only lost opportunity was not giving Jaime's Blue Beetle transformation more pop. He was one of the few heroes we truly see the inception of, so that should have garnered a special piece of art, if you ask me. That's gonna be all for today, and if you've watched until the end here, I want to personally thank you for that, and to please like, share, and subscribe, please follow me on all my social media platforms, and to please join me next time for Catwoman Volume 1.